What if I told you that the universe is polluted and far more than you think? Okay, maybe you knew that already. But what if I told you that scientists might have a way to clean it, using something that looks a lot like a super weapon? When we think about pollution, we usually imagine plastic in the oceans, smog covering big cities, or forests disappearing. Humanity has changed the planet in many ways, and not always in a good way. And yes, even space is starting to get very polluted. Right now, thousands of satellites are orbiting the Earth. They help us every single day without us even noticing. Satellites power GPS navigation, weather forecasts, internet connections, television broadcasts, and even disaster monitoring. But satellites don't last forever. When they stop working, many of them stay in orbit as dead machines. Add to that pieces of old rockets, fragments from explosions, and debris from past collisions, and suddenly the space around our planet starts to look less like a clean vacuum and more like a cosmic junkyard. Scientists call these space debris. Today, more than 30,000 large pieces of debris are actively tracked by radar systems on Earth. But that is only the beginning. There are also hundreds of thousands of smaller fragments, and possibly millions of tiny pieces that are simply too small to detect. And the scary part is how fast they move. Objects in low Earth orbit travel at around 28,000 kilometers per hour. At that speed, even something as small as a bolt or a tiny paint chip can seriously damage or even destroy a satellite. Imagine a bullet flying through space, but you can't see it and you don't know where it is. This creates a serious problem for the future of space exploration. Because the more debris we create, the more collisions happen, and every collision produces even more debris. Scientists even have a name for the worst possible scenario. It's called Kessler syndrome. This is a chain reaction where collisions create more debris, which then causes more collisions, which creates even more debris. Eventually, the environment around Earth could become so dangerous that launching satellites might become extremely difficult or even impossible. And if that happens, we could lose many of the systems modern civilization depends on. No GPS, no satellite internet, no accurate weather monitoring. Humanity would suddenly realize how much we rely on the technology orbiting above our heads. So the question becomes very simple. Can we actually clean space? Cleaning space is not as simple as picking up trash on the ground. You can't just send astronauts with garbage bags. Everything in orbit is moving at extreme speeds, and the distances involved are enormous. Even reaching a single piece of debris can require a complex and expensive space mission. But scientists and engineers have been thinking about this problem for years, and they have already proposed some interesting solutions. Some of them sound surprisingly simple. One idea is to use giant nets. The concept is similar to fishing in the ocean. A spacecraft approaches a piece of debris and launches a large net that captures the object. Once trapped, the spacecraft can drag the debris down into Earth's atmosphere, where it burns up safely. Another idea involves harpoons. Yes, real space harpoons. A spacecraft fires a harpoon into a piece of debris, attaches a cable, and then slowly pulls it down into a lower orbit where atmospheric friction eventually destroys it. These ideas might sound a little crazy, but small versions of these systems have already been tested in experimental missions. There are also proposals for drag sails. These are large, lightweight structures that attach to satellites at the end of their life. The sail increases air resistance in the upper atmosphere, slowly pulling the satellite down until it burns up. It's like adding a parachute to space junk. But even with all these clever ideas, there is a huge challenge. There are simply too many objects in orbit. Removing all of these objects one by one could take decades or even centuries. And things might get even more crowded in the near future. For example, companies like SpaceX are launching massive satellite constellations. You might already know one of them, Starlink, Elon Musk's project to provide global internet from space. Starlink alone plans to operate thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit. And hey, if you want to learn more about how that system works, you can subscribe to the channel and check out our other video about Starlink satellite network after this one. I'll leave the link in the description below. But projects like these also show why managing space traffic will become extremely important. Because the more satellites we launch, the more important it becomes to keep space clean. And that's why scientists started thinking about solutions that don't even require touching the debris. One of the most fascinating ideas ever proposed is called the ion beam chef arm. Instead of grabbing debris with a net or a harpoon, a spacecraft would use a powerful ion engine to push objects away. Ion engines work by accelerating charged particles to extremely high speeds. These particles create a gentle but continuous thrust. In the ion beam shepherd concept, the spacecraft would point this beam directly at a piece of debris. the beam would not destroy the object. Instead, it will apply a small but steady force, slowly changing its orbit. Over time, the debris would move into a lower orbit where Earth's atmosphere would naturally pull it down and burn it up. Another idea involves lasers. Some scientists have proposed building powerful ground-based lasers that could target small pieces of debris in orbit. When a laser pulse hits the surface of a fragment, it slightly hits the material. A tiny amount of vaporized material shoots off the surface, creating a small push in the opposite direction. That tiny push can change the orbit of the debris just enough to send it falling back towards Earth. In other words, the laser doesn't destroy the object, it just nudges it in the right direction. But even layers and ion beams might not be enough to deal with the biggest objects. All satellites and rocket stages can weigh several tons. Moving something that large requires a much more powerful system. And that brings us to one of the most dramatic ideas ever suggested, a solution so powerful that almost sounds like science fiction. For decades, scientists have explored the possibility of using directed energy systems to manage space debris. Some of these systems were originally developed for military purposes. The idea was to defend satellites or intercept incoming missiles, but the same technology could potentially be used for something very different: cleaning space. Imagine a powerful orbital platform equipped with high-energy lasers or particle beams. Instead of destroying targets, the system could precisely target debris fragments and alter their trajectory. By carefully adjusting the energy of each pulse, the beam could push objects out of dangerous orbits and send them safely back into the atmosphere. In other words, the same technology designed to fight wars in space could also help protect the environment around our planet. It would be like using a super weapon to clean up our own mess. Of course, building such a system would raise many questions. Who controls it? How powerful should it be? And how do we make sure it is used responsibly? Because technologies that powerful always come with risks. But one thing is certain, as humanity launches more and more satellites, the problem of space debris will only grow. Alright, before we move on, here are a few fun facts about space debris that show just how strange this problem really is. The International Space Station sometimes has to move out of the way to avoid debris, and astronauts occasionally have to fire the station's thrusters to dodge incoming fragments. Even something as small as a 1 cm metal fragment can hit with the energy of a hand grenade when traveling at orbital speed. One of the most famous space debris events happened in 2009, when an inactive Russian satellite collided with a functioning American satellite. The crash created thousands of new debris fragments instantly. There is actually a tool bag lost by astronauts that orbited Earth for months. During a spacewalk in 2008, astronauts accidentally let it go, and for a while people on Earth could sometimes spot it with binoculars. Some debris currently orbiting Earth is more than 60 years old, left over from the very first space missions in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Space junk can stay up there for decades or even centuries. Private companies are planning massive satellite constellations with thousands of spacecraft. New space missions are being announced every year. Space is becoming crowded. If we want to continue exploring and using this environment, we may need to start thinking seriously about how to protect it. Just like we learned to manage pollution on Earth, we may soon need to learn how to manage pollution in space. Because the space around our planet is not infinite, it is a fragile environment, and it might be one of the most important ones we have. The future of communication, navigation, weather forecasting, and exploration all depend on it. And if we don't take care of it now, the sky above us could become the next place where humanity's trash becomes impossible to ignore. And that's it for today's journey in one of the strangest pollution problems humanity has ever created. If you enjoyed this video and like exploring fascinating science and technologies, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.